I'm Janine. This is Outside the Box. Standing by to join me is Ross Gothelf, and we are going to talk about what it's like to be a teacher the past few years in the pandemic, even though you've been a teacher for the past 9 years. Welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So we were talking, and like I said, you've been a teacher for over 9 years, but what has it been like the past few years in the pandemic? It's not like there was a training session of how to teach online and to get ready. It was like, tomorrow we're not here. Yeah,
I think it's been a series of, this can't get any worse type thinking. Since we first got out March 13th of 2020, it was kind of like, we just need to get to the end of the year. And then the following year, the 2020, 2021 year, that ended up being completely online for us here in Denver. It was a huge adjustment.
yeah.
And then coming into this most recent school year that just concluded, thought, this would be great. We're back in person. And, little did we realize what we were exactly in for. And I would say confidently that this has been the most difficult school year since I started teaching back in 2013.
Wow. 2022 has been the most difficult year? And
Yes.
Why is that?
I think the return to in-person learning, during the pandemic, everybody was talking about how we need to reinvent education, revolutionize what we're doing, and we can't go back to the way things were before. But then when everyone got back, I think everyone was so excited to be back in person that we just wanted to resume, kind of like we see in all other aspects of life currently, right? People just want to go back to the way things were, but there is no way things were before.
That's right. Yeah. No, I had mentioned to you, one of the things that strikes me is that here, STEM and STEAM were adopted, but mental health has never been consistent in every school across the country. And I feel so strongly that things have to change, that so much pressure has been on teachers and counselors in the pandemic and having to deal with all this. But at a policy level, there needs to be preventative initiatives, maybe peer-to-peer situations where they're more connected, less pressure on the guidance counselor. And obviously, if it's an elevated situation, they go to that guidance counselor. But there's never been consistency. When I talk to some schools, they'll say, well, we have mental health week. And I feel like there needs to be better training and education to prioritize mental health, because once they leave K to 12, if their mental health is not in check, where does that leave them in college and then into adulthood?
I completely agree. I think like mental health, think about what does it take for a human being to just be successful generally, right? As a society, we spend tons of money on our physical well-being, from apparel to gym memberships to diets and all that stuff, but we pay little attention to our own mental being. And I think particularly I work in a school that's overwhelmingly students of color, Black and brown students, and the overwhelming majority are also on free and reduced lunch. And so you think about the stressors that growing up in poverty places on you, along with various other systems of oppression that are working against the students that I work with. Mental health has to be at the front and center of everything that we do. But I think that I agree that a lot of it gets kind of watered down, or we get, we have a social worker on our campus, but she's so overworked that she's not able to really see everyone at every time, right? We have a school psychologist, but she's only there a couple of days because we share with another campus. And so, completely agree. We need more focus on mental health to be able to do the things that we would like to do in the school.
Yes. Now, it's so interesting. I hear you say there's one psychologist and one of this person, and I can't imagine what it's like to walk in their shoes or in your shoes as a teacher. Now, you said, are you a public school?
Yes.
Yeah. So students are already up against situations that are challenging. You add in a pandemic, and perhaps parents are one of the 40 million people that lost their jobs. Or as Mental Health America says, because every week I'm following their research, there's been increased levels of abuse. There's also anxiety, depression, suicide, food insecurity, on and on and on and on. So when I see the news, which is horrifying with all the shootings, I keep thinking it all comes down to mental health, right? Personally, if it wasn't a gun, it could be a BB gun, anything, right? It comes down to mental health.
Yeah, I think like mental health plays a big part at the school level, right?
Yeah.
If we're focusing on schools, yeah, I think like a lot of people who are in positions of power, who are making decisions about funding for schools in Colorado, we've historically been very low in terms of per pupil funding. There's a lot of just like horrific budget maneuvers that have been kind of implemented to keep education from getting the funding that they should be receiving. But even going to the national level, right? The folks whose children, let me rephrase this. Politicians' children will be okay, right?
Yeah.
They'll get access to the private therapists that they need, that everybody needs and deserves to have access to, right? But they are able to turn a blind eye to those that don't have those opportunities.
Right.
And, they'll say, oh, we'll throw more money at it without actually taking a look at, is this delivering the outcomes that we intended for this money to achieve? So such a big issue. It's hard to even really, kind of begin pointing the finger of, hey, we need to start here. But I think common understanding and agreement is one such place to start.
Yes, we have to start somewhere. And the more students I've been talking to, they're saying things like, I don't feel heard. I don't feel like I can talk to somebody. I'm not going to talk to that one guidance counselor. They'll say like, I don't feel like they really get me. I'd rather go talk to my peers. On and on and on. They don't feel a sense of connection and compassion. I'm not saying that's at every school, but it's for a lot of students.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I've had students, I think as an educator, my first task before I can even instruct anybody content-wise is to build relationships with young people.
Yeah.
And because, if people don't think that you care about them, they're not going to listen to anything you have to say.
Sure.
That quote's attributable to somebody that I can't think of off the top of my head. But yeah, I mean, I've had a number of kids tell me some quite like horrific things this year. And that's always been the case that, I've had kids that'll confide in me things, but I think that the incidence rate this year is higher than it has been previously. And it just points to, how badly people are hurting right now. Because a lot of it deals with people not having access to the material resources they need.
Mm-hmm.
And then as a result, right, other issues get compounded.
Yes. I'm hearing that too. Sometimes a student will reach out to me from LinkedIn, and it starts with, I lost my internship or my job opportunity because of COVID. This started in 2020. And they don't have an idea of what's next, what to do. They don't know what opportunities lie ahead, the uncertainty, the ambiguity, everything. And then the more we kind of brainstorm or talk through it, it just gives them some ideas. And I want people to feel like they're not alone, because Gen Z particularly feels so their lives are disrupted. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think back to just 2 weeks ago, the week of the shooting in Uvalde, we had a group of juniors who are now going to be seniors who very much felt like at a loss for what can we even do? And of their own volition, organized themselves, met with our admin, reached out to a couple of teachers to pick their brains, and organized a walkout for that Friday. There had been a national one earlier in the week, but it was poorly organized, and a bunch of kids just ended up kind of skipping school.
Mm-hmm.
But they got in touch with the police to do traffic control, and and contacted the media. And so I see like exactly what you're saying, that there needs to be opportunities for them to connect with one another, validate each other's experiences, and also see opportunities for hope. I think that's particularly difficult right now for adults. I try and put myself in a position of, if I was a 16, 17-year-old right now, and I look at the climate crisis, right, and issues around homelessness and housing in Denver in particular, the war in Ukraine, right, like whatever existential issue you want to point to, it
Yes.
seems to be like coalescing right in this moment. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, there needs to be greater attention paid to mental health and then instilling hope, because I think I identify as a millennial, right? Like, I think my generation and the generation above me didn't do a great job of working together. I think there's like a lot of conflict amongst us,
Yes.
between us, but Gen Z and the millennials and whoever else need to get together and start figuring things out, because, you know, the time for haggling is over. And I think that Gen Z really does understand that urgency.
I am so impressed with a lot of people in the Gen Z demographic, in that they are very open about things that have long been not discussed. They'll say, I'm taking a mental health day. I need to focus on my mental health. I did this for my mental health. Whereas somebody perhaps my age, they would never go into work and say, or call in, I'm going to take a mental health day because, I'm going to come across as not well, or something's wrong with me and I can't perform. What are people going to say? Whereas they seem very confident, and they also stand up for things that are so important, whether it's, people that are experiencing homelessness or climate change or, diversity and inclusion, on and on and on. These are such important issues. And I feel like as they become adults, they're going to have it together, because they are prioritizing things that there's been so much apathy and there's no attention. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, like, I hear criticism. I mean, look, I've criticized some of my students, right, for work ethic and things like that. But you hear some of the same things that were said and continue to be said about millennials, right? I think it's always going to be kind of like, back in my day, we did X, Y, and Z, and nowadays kids don't want to work. And like, I think there'll always be that
I
narrative.
hear that too. Yeah.
Being pushed.
Yeah.
But I agree. I tell my students this a lot, and I think they probably think I'm being corny, but they give me a lot of hope for the future. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but when I see them and the things that they're willing to persevere through, and it's just more than just survive, right? Like, really go on and do some pretty phenomenal things. I think about a student of mine who, recently, and she's not unique in this situation, but like, within the past couple of years, her dad was deported, and now, is one of our top achieving students, was a national speech and debate qualifier, and so at one point was number one in the country. So like, I think about that, and that gives me a lot of hope that we young people are spectacular, and sometimes as adults we just need to create the conditions to allow them to thrive and kind of like step back and
Yes.
let them do their thing.
Well, when you talk about hope, which is so important, we want to build positivity. And when we give them opportunities to do something that is purpose-driven and meaningful, and it perhaps takes them out of that mindset of whatever it is they're dealing with, but they're shifting and they're helping somebody that's perhaps an older generation, or somebody that's experiencing homelessness, or whatever, fill in the blank, that's going to lift them up. It's without a doubt, it's going to change their perspective. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. You don't know. A lot of times, we've had students who will be exposed to like an internship, right? Or a guest speaker will come to campus and they connect with that guest speaker, and all of a sudden, like, a whole new world kind of opens up before them. And I think that's like part of our job in education is to be connectors.
Yeah.
Particularly in communities where those social networks, right, or access to services is not just like part and parcel to your household.
Yes.
So, yeah, opportunities are great, but I also think that we need to, as a society, kind of going back to what you said before, right? Like, there's a lot we can do to create better access, so that people not only get exposed to those opportunities, right, but really are able to see them through. I've had a ton of students who cannot do a summer program because there is a cost and travel fee associated with it, and they need to work to help their parents out, right?
Mhm.
And kind of until we're able to do that, I don't think we're really creating like equitable access for everyone.
You're right. You're right. And that's such a letdown to be excited about an opportunity and to know you don't have the financial means to get on that plane or to for your room and board. And because that could change their trajectory if they have that opportunity.
Right. Or it's even like, hey, yeah, here's this great internship, but it's unpaid. And so I think like employers, whether they're in the private or public sector, I think there has been movement to provide scholarships. You never really know kind of, how much is actually being offered, right?
Yes.
And yeah, I'll leave it there.
Yeah. So pretty much to recap, what you're saying is give them opportunities where it's doable. It's realistic. You're not setting up a financial barrier, or no kid really wants an unpaid internship unless they're in school and they need it for, credit. As far as the summer goes, because I remember having unpaid internships and I only did it for the resume builder, but then I had to go waitress at 5:30 in the morning in Boston, by the way. Yeah, where your sister lives. Yeah. And it was tough. But I had to pay the rent, buy food, take care of myself. But I was not in the situation that some of your students are. And so, yes, the opportunities need to be there that they can be attainable.
Yeah, I think about, there's an educator and he's been a professor. His name's Dr. Jeff Duncan Andrade. And, he's written a couple books, but in a piece that he wrote, he talks about the need for something called critical hope and how we need to avoid things like hokey hope, which are, kind of these empty phrases of, if you work hard, you'll get to where you want to be, right? This kind of like American dream type style of thinking that a lot of times you see inspirational posters on teachers' walls and stuff, but kids can see right through that. And if we're not providing them meaningful access to opportunities, and it's not for a lack of them wanting to work, right? I mean, a lot of them have been working since they were elementary school students, taking care of their siblings, which I would consider a job. And, if we're not doing that, then, they're not really going to be able to get to where they deserve to be.
Yeah.
Whatever that looks like.
And this is such an important time to give them the opportunity to work for pay, especially if their parents are in a situation where they're not employed and they want to think positively about their futures, because that paid opportunity could lead to something else, and a job and a career and a major and a whatever. And so they do need those opportunities. So for people watching this, think about that when you're looking for interns. The one thing I noticed too is, because I'm a mental health advocate and a speaker, is when I was talking to schools in 2010, 2011, telling them the kind of things I talk about, self-care and resilience, and the gatekeepers of the school would just shut me down and they'd say, we do that. And I'm thinking, what? Because unless you truly get to know someone, right, in a meaningful, polite way, you don't know what they have to offer. And what's upsetting to me right now too is there are a lot of opportunists that pitch different presentations, and you're not going to solve the mental health pandemic in a workshop, a one-time workshop. It has to be strategies that are integrated, right, in a meaningful way.
Yeah, no, and you're totally right. Like, we carve out time we are supposed to carve out time on our campus for mindfulness in every class, to the point where we actually integrate a couple more minutes into the bell schedule following lunch, to provide a little extra time for that. Unfortunately, that's fallen by the wayside because, it's so hard to find teachers, right, that, you're going to take disciplinary action against a teacher because they're not implementing mindfulness with fidelity. I think like it's important enough that, yes, in a perfect world, in the private sector, sure. But we're not in the private sector. And so we kind of don't have that ability. But to your point, I would say if every teacher implemented that with fidelity day in and day out, every class period, there would be tremendous gains.
Yes.
But we've had the one-off workshops where we've had like some group come speak, and it'll be powerful for that moment, but do the gains really, do they maintain themselves throughout the course of the year? Without a doubt.
Right.
That, I mean, especially in a generation where, you know, I love to give Gen Z a lot of praise, but I also will say their attention spans aren't great because of things like TikTok and Instagram, you know.
Right.
I think us adults see that as well. So, you know, you're trying to think about a one-off thing where they're going to go home and watch, you know, 500 videos and already forget about it the next day. So,
Exactly. Yeah. No, it has to be something that is part of a routine. I mean, like I started this whole conversation as we have STEM and STEAM, but mental health and wellness is not part of the curriculum. It should be. It should be top priority, because at the end of the day, someone asked me, could you lead a workshop about the keys to success? And I said, listen, I was a DF student growing up. I came from a rocky home life. And my feelings about the keys to success is that you have to cut the kids some slack that are not doing well on Zoom. This was 2021. And the keys to success are being able to fall down and get up on repeat. Just dust yourself off and go, you know what? I got rejected. I failed. I did it. And just keep going and lifting yourself up, because what's the alternative?
Yeah. But
That's
and
life.
I would say like you need to add like high expectations to that, right? I think, and that's been a tough line to balance, particularly coming out of the pandemic or the current iteration of the pandemic, right? Is this idea that like, yes, students have been through a lot. You know, I was just talking to the woman who founded our high school, who's now the chief academic officer in our network, and you know, we can't keep saying though that it's okay. Like they're going through a lot, so we
Yes.
shouldn't expect them to, you know,
Get a free pass.
right.
Yeah.
It's not okay to be late to class like, over
No,
and
no.
over and over again, right? Like it's not
Yeah.
okay to not put forth your best effort on this assignment. So it's tough, right? Because you feel for a kid telling you, you know, that my dad just walked out last night, and you know, it's like, I want to create space for you. Let's talk if you want to talk, or I hope you have an adult in the building that you feel like you can trust and talk to. But also, like, you're 17 years old. You know, I need you to do this assignment, right? I can give you more time.
Yeah.
But we're still going to need to get it done, because that's what's going to be expected of you.
Well, that's good that you're willing to listen and give them more time. And
it's a tough balance though, because sometimes your heart just breaks for these young people, and you're also like, I'm not their parent, and that's not my role to play. And it's also, I can't fix society. You know, as much as I would love to fix it in this moment, I can't all of a sudden double the staff at Denver Health so that there's a therapist who can see you, you know, sooner than a month.
yeah.
So yeah.
Are you saying that you feel that the student needs to want to help themselves?
There definitely needs to be that, but a support network, I think, can serve in place of that until that young person is able to motivate themselves.
Yes. Because I'll give you a scenario. Let's say a student has a rocky home life. You don't even know it. It's right before finals. They keep coming to school late. You don't know it, but there's not enough food in their house. They're not really sleeping much. Maybe they're sleeping on the floor, or I don't even know. How are you supposed to know? How are you supposed to be supportive if you don't know all those factors?
It's a great question. I mean, I think that if it's that late in the year, right, you hope that you've built a classroom culture and that you have a school culture where people feel comfortable sharing. I mean, I will say over and over again, look, you don't have to tell me, but I hope there's someone in the building, or I'll ask, is there someone in the building you feel like you can talk to about this, right? You don't. And that's part of like the job, is paying attention to his kids so that you notice, right? You're not going to know all those things without them sharing, but that you notice that there's a shift in behavior. That this scholar who was always worried about being impeccably dressed or having their hair always done right, you know, for a couple of days is just like looking real disheveled, right? And it's not my job to investigate, but it is my job to ask and provide that space. And that needs to be done across the school, because sometimes, not every kid loves me, and that's okay. But I hope that in one class where they feel like they can truly be themselves, they're able to kind of get that attention they need. And that if we need to refer them to someone who's actually trained, as a psychologist or as a social worker, that we can kind of do that referral that way.
So in your school, are teachers trained, or are they aware to notice something and do something? Just like students, are they trained to, if they see something, to do something?
Yeah, I think at the most fundamental level, every year we have to do like the state of Colorado's mandated reporter training. I wouldn't say that's super helpful. It is a good reminder that like you have a legal obligation to say something. It's not about your opinion,
Yeah.
If you see something that looks like abuse or neglect.
Yes.
At the campus level, we've had trainings on trauma-based instruction and techniques to address behavioral concerns that will arise in a context where scholars are dealing with quite a lot on their plate. And I also think we look at it, our school has a social justice focus in particular. And so we always try and focus on, how are we seeing race and class and gender and sexuality? How are we seeing those issues kind of intersect in our given context? Because Dina Simmons, who is in the mental health sphere, and I watched her give a talk once, and she said, SEL work, I know that's become like a dirty word in conservative circles now, but like at social emotional learning, like
Yes.
is not, we can't just do it without talking about race when we are instructing Black and Brown students, because there's a reason why conditions for our students that are Black and Brown in particular are the way that they are, and if we don't teach them, hey, here's the history of kind of how we've gotten to where we are as a society, then we're doing them a disservice. And we're just perpetuating this idea that, oh, you as an individual should just overcome the obstacles that have been put in front of you.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So we're going to run out of time soon, but anything else you think we could do differently? It sounds like teachers being aware to notice. Obviously, teachers have a ton on their plate, but to be aware, to be, when you see a student that is normally extroverted that's now suddenly acting a different way, to do something and encouraging students to speak up.
Yeah, I don't know how prevalent this is nationally, and I also would be curious to see statistics on this program, but Colorado does have something called Safe to Tell.
Safe to Tell?
Yeah, Safe, the number 2, Tell, and it's an app, it's a website, there's a phone number where anonymously students can report, hey, so-and-so is talking about killing themselves, right? Now, I saw numbers in Axios Denver recently that there are like a number of false reports, but it was actually a significantly smaller number than I was thinking. And it happened, it's 24/7. So I'd be curious how effective something like that can be. But I would be remiss to say, Janine, like, as a society, we're not going to fix all of our ills by focusing on education, but we would solve a large number of them if we were able to do public education right. And I'm not trying to be an alarmist or exaggerate here, but I really feel like we're in a moment where public education is on the precipice of just no longer existing. And I know that sounds crazy to say, but I saw a statistic earlier this year that CEA, the Colorado Educators Association, which is kind of like the statewide union organizing body, they said in a survey, 2 out of 3 teachers, granted this was mid-year, right? But 2 out of 3 teachers in Colorado were thinking about not returning.
Wait, you dropped out. 2 to 3 teachers did what?
2 out of 3 educators in this survey said that they were considering not returning the following year.
Yeah.
That's already on the high number of vacancies nationwide. So unless we start, and everybody's like, oh, we're forming a partnership with this university. Let's be frank. Unless you start paying teachers more.
Yeah.
And I mean, like states where the story's right, teachers have to work 2-3 jobs. Unless you start paying teachers more
and valuing them.
And valuing them.
Yeah.
And how do we value someone in our capitalist society? Is either by compensating them more or giving them more time to do the things that they need to do. I mean, those are really the only two ways you can compensate someone. And so
Right.
unless we start doing that, I'm worried. You know, I know we talked about hope, but from a systems level, I'm very concerned about where things will go in public education. And what really makes it scary for me is knowing who will be worse off as a result, which is our students in low-income communities, recently arrived immigrants, Black and Brown, Indigenous students, and that's what keeps me up at night. You know, is thinking about that.
It's ironic you bring this up because I was going to say to you, have you known a lot of teachers that have left the profession? That was going to be my next question.
Yes. Just at my school alone, off the top of my head, I would say we had at least five staff members resign throughout the year. I am not even naming our principal, who resigned as well, probably for the best. But and then you can't replace. You know, it's good luck finding a good chemistry teacher to begin with. But to try to replace one mid-year,
right?
And like our 10th graders probably had 3 core content area teachers leave throughout the year, and then behaviors were horrible as a result.
Of course,
because there were no expectations, there's no systems in place.
Yeah.
And you know, compounding that is the fact the last time they were really in a school, they were in 8th grade. So yeah. And I think, Janine, what makes it difficult is because, you know, at least talking to one of those people who resigned, you know, knowing the reason they resigned, I don't blame them. But from like a, hey, I work at this school level, it sucks because you're like, now I'm going to have to give up an off period to sub more often. Right. Because we sub in-house when we can't find subs. And frankly, a lot of people are just fed up with being treated poorly by the school system. And now as a society is suddenly villainizing teachers for speaking truth to power. And it's alarming.
I love how open and honest you're being. I was going to ask this next question. You tell me if it's okay to ask this, but I was going to ask with regards to all the shootings, seem like every day there's another shooting. Why do you think that is, and what can be done about it?
Oof. I mean, look, at a fundamental level, if people didn't have guns, then this wouldn't be an issue. I taught for 2 years in Madrid, in Spain. And in my 2 years there, not once did I ever have to worry about getting shot on the street, you know? I mean, let alone in a school. It's just because guns aren't a thing. I think, unfortunately, right, Pandora's box has been open.
Yeah.
And I know people from all sides of the aisle have their own perspectives, but it's just too easy to get a gun in our society. You know, yes, people make the argument, well, like, there's plenty of people that own these guns that don't go and shoot up schools and movie theaters and grocery stores. Yeah, but I think that, like, the fact of the matter is they're still able to get these guns. And so, you know, there needs to be like serious action taken on guns. I'm not saying that nobody should go to have a gun. I know that there's a lot of arguments that the issue goes beyond just guns, that like, there's violence kind of ingrained in the U.S. society because of what the U.S. has been. Look, I think like the fact of the matter is people don't feel safe right now. I have colleagues that don't feel safe. And I think further compounding that is this sense of hopelessness because we talk about these shootings for a couple of days, and then we go on to the next one. So I told this to a colleague recently, Janine. It was somewhat in jest, but I think this whole year has kind of been let's laugh to keep from crying. I told a colleague, I said, hey, if I die in a school shooting, which if there's a shooting at my school, like I'm gonna have to put my body on the line, you know, because that's my promise to these students' families is that their child is gonna be safe while they're with me. You know, I said, hey, you put my body outside Mitch McConnell's office, whoever the Senate Majority Leader or the Senate leader is for the Republicans. I said, you put my body there, and that, like, please, until someone does something, that's good what it's going to take, because I think we're at a point where we can't continue this.
No.
I mean, how many mass shootings need to have taken place since Uvalde, for someone to finally say enough's enough? And I think it's going to take something like a general strike where as a society, people are like, we can't continue.
Right.
Because the political, I teach civics, the system's not set up. We can claim we live in a democracy, but the reality is that we don't. We don't live in a democracy. I would love to live in one, but that's not the reality, because the reality is that we have a minority of senators who have a disproportionate amount of power over what can be done in this country. And they're wielding in a way that doesn't align with the views of the majority of folks on a number of issues, not just on the topic.
Yeah. I just felt like, and thank you for answering that, because I wasn't sure if you're going to. It's a tough question, but I kept thinking about the profile of the 18-year-old that went into that school. And I thought, what's his backstory? Like, I want to know everyone's backstory. What would motivate somebody to go and do that? What's his home life? What was going on at home? There's so many variables, and there's no clear answer. I feel like if it wasn't guns, it could be something else. There's just a huge mental health mess right now, and guns just seem to be what people are using.
Yeah, and Janine, like, the fact of the matter is that what is it? I'm trying to use my words here now that I'm on summer break. The leading cause of death in terms of guns, it's suicides.
Yeah,
that kills the most people, right? I'm trying to put that into some type of coherent statement.
No, I understand. Yeah,
most handgun deaths are suicides, right? Okay. So, I mean, you want to talk about how do these align, these two topics, right? So it's like, we got to be able to walk and chew gum. We got to be able to do both things at once. They're both huge issues, but we have to. People are dying without us trying as a society to fix these problems. So what do we have to lose, right?
Right.
Because the reality is that this stuff can happen anywhere, at any time, and I think everyone has just been become numb. I think back to the day of the shooting in Texas, and my immediate reaction, because I saw it when I was at school, was nothing.
Wow.
I had no reaction at first, because it was like, I need to get through my day. I need to teach.
Yeah.
And, I can't process this right now.
No.
When I was able to finally sit down and process, I read someone on Twitter, his name's Clint Smith, the way he put it, these kids ate their favorite cereals this morning, played with their friends on the bus, were thinking about summer break, and now
they're gone.
Close to 20 of them have their beds empty tonight. That really hit home.
Yep.
And it's got to be both, right? I think you're right. People would still find ways to be violent without guns.
Yeah.
But it's a lot harder to kill 20 people with a knife than a gun.
It's true. There's so much anger and mental duress right now. It's really concerning. And, and I think about the levels of anxiety that have risen because of all this. And all this information is so accessible on social media. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so many things, right? Social media can be great. It can also be, quite toxic. And I think Instagram's own internal research spoke to that before it was buried by the powers that be at Facebook or at Meta. But I think we shouldn't be surprised that things are as bad as they are right now. You talked about before about how so many people, 40 million people lost their jobs during the pandemic.
Right.
We lost over 1 million people, which is a number that's hard to process. But,
yes,
you think about one individual, right? Someone's mom.
Yep.
That's huge. That's a huge tragedy into its own right. And so we have all these problems that have been saddled upon people who already were being exploited or already, not doing well to begin with. We gave them a couple checks in the mail, sparse as they were, and now people are like, why is the crime rate going up? Why are
Right.
all these mass shootings happening? Why are schools struggling so badly? And so it shouldn't be surprising. And I think, like, as you continue to harp on mental health, like, we have answers that are not, they're not, I don't want to say silver bullet, because I don't think I shouldn't use that phrase anymore, but you're not going to be the antidote, the one antidote to all of societal's problems.
Right.
Perfection can't get in the way of good. I think we got to start somewhere, until we are in a place where everybody feels like they have what they need.
Yes.
To avoid having to get into a gang, to avoid to turn into opioids, right?
Right.
The things of that nature.
Right. Yeah, I feel that there's so much work to do, and I hope there are more opportunities to connect students so they feel less disconnected, especially if they can't connect at home, and they feel less alone. So then they have some skills to go move out of school into life, because no one could have imagined what we're living through right now. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, like, to start heading in a more hopeful direction, I think, for the reasons we discussed before, that this group of young people will have to be our greatest generation. And I think that they can very well live up to that potential if we allow them to.
Yeah. Well, you've heard about the Mental Health Youth Action Forum that went to DC?
No.
About 32 students, I think, went to DC. Some of them have been on my show. They're outstanding. They are mental health advocates. They're anywhere from 19 on up. They just want to see change. They are doing meaningful work. They have their own struggles at times. And I just feel that hopefully other students can feel like they're less alone and that there are no options for them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I appreciate the work you're doing to continue to highlight the need for greater connection amongst young people in particular, and just the call to action on mental health more generally. I think more people we can have talking about having these conversations. I didn't know you before my sister kind of was like, hey, like, I think you should talk to this person. And you emailed me, like, but the fact that we're able to have this conversation just here and now, right? No prep. You didn't tell me what you were going to ask me, anything like
Nothing.
that. That gives me hope, right? That there's a lot of good happening already, and that we can continue to push for more in the days ahead.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you for having me on, and please let me know if I can ever be of any additional help.